You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 2nd of December 2013. Tory minister claims £6,000 in London hotel bills but has a home 1 mile away from Parliament. Iraqis win 800,000 after SAS beat them in hunt for Red Cap's killers. Essex Social Services forces Caesarean on Italian who suffered mental breakdown during training course. Jam-packed jails force Norway to free criminals. Spanish government sets heavy fines for violent protests, insults to police and state. Man allowed to adopt despite sex crime past. Abbott's Australian government to dump laws on hate speech. Gender queer rising. Colleges welcomes kids who identify as neither male nor female. Study same-sex households endanger children. Thought for the day, a little drinky or 100. And finally, a religious laugh. UK News. Tory minister claims £6,000 in London hotel bills but has a home 1 mile away from Parliament. Tory Cabinet Minister Andrew Lansley claimed £6,000 in London hotel bills despite owning a home 1 mile away from Parliament. The House of Commons leader enjoyed dozens of overnight stays on the taxpayer while the £1 million flat he owns with his wife was a 15-minute walk away sat empty. Official records indicate ex-Health Secretary Mr Lansley, who earns a ministerial salary of £134,565 a year, has no tenants in the Georgian property because he has not declared any rental income from it. But it is believed that one Lansley family member uses the flat in Tremley, Pimlico. And at the end of his working day the MP could even return to his constituency home in South Cambridgeshire, only a 50-minute train ride away from London. Latest expenses records from the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority reveal Mr Lansley claimed £4,978 on hotel stays between April 2012 and March this year. And in the first 3 months of the current financial year he claimed £972. All the time the flat, believed to have had more than one bedroom, was not rented out according to the parliamentary records. World at 8. It's a good job if you can get it. Iraqis win £800,000 after SAS beat them in hunt for Red Cap's killers. 9 Iraqi police officers who said they were tortured by the SAS have been awarded a total of about £800,000 in compensation. Up to 40 soldiers, including a former SAS commander, are under investigation for alleged brutality. If found guilty of actual bodily harm or grievous bodily harm, they may be jailed. The secret payout, which provoked uproar when it emerged last night, was arranged by the Ministry of Defence and the Iraqis solicitors. The claimants accused the SAS of strangling them and beating them with rifles at a police station at Majar el-Kabir in Iraq's Maytan province 10 years ago. World at 8. 10 years ago? What rubbish. Just another self-serving jibe at our armed forces. What compensation will our guys get? None, because the Iraqis killed them, and dead men don't need compensation, do they? Essex Social Services forces Caesarean on Italian who suffered mental breakdown during training course. Social Services forcibly removed a pregnant woman's unborn baby by a Caesarean section and put it up for adoption after obtaining a High Court order on the grounds the mother had suffered a mental breakdown. Essex Council obtained an order allowing them to sedate the woman against her will before taking her daughter and placing it into care. The Italian woman, who was in Britain on a work training course, claims she had not even been warned that she would be given a Caesarean. It's not believed a natural birth would have posed a risk to her or the child's health. Social workers argue they were acting in the best interest of the baby, who is now 15 months old, and are refusing to hand her back to the mother despite claims that she has made a complete recovery. The Sunday Telegraph reports. World at 8. I'm keeping out of this one until all the facts are given. But this operation cost the NHS taxpayers money, of course. European News. Jam-packed jails force Norway to free criminals. Police in northern Norway are being forced to release criminals back onto the streets because of a shortage of prison spaces. The acting head of police in the city of Tromsø warned this week. Ina Sparbo-Lisnes cautioned in a statement on Thursday that in the last few months the situation had reached a crisis point. "We have several times discovered that there were no free spaces and so simply had to let them back out," he told VG newspaper. "As a result, new criminal offences take place that otherwise would not have happened. Our ability to prevent crime and ensure safety is reduced." Lisnes' warning followed a complaint earlier this month from the head of the police in Vestfold County near Oslo, who proposed freeing up space by converting an old army camp in far northern Norway into emergency prisons for foreign criminals. Spanish government sets heavy fines for violent protests, insults to police and state. The Spanish government has approved draft legislation that sets fines of up to €30,000 for offences such as burning the national flag, insulting the state or causing serious disturbances outside Parliament. The draft Citizen Security Bill, presented Friday by Interior Minister Jorge Fernandez Diaz, has been heavily criticised by opposition parties, judicial and social groups as an attempt by the Conservative government to muzzle protests against its handling of the severe economic crisis. The measures, an update of the 1992 law, also include fines of up to €1,000 for insulting or threatening police officers during demonstrations. Similar fines are planned for disseminating photographs of police officers that endanger them or police operations. The bill must be approved by Parliament, where the ruling party has an absolute majority. Man allowed to adopt despite sex crime past. Radio Sweden. Authorities in Helsingborg will allow a man to adopt his 10-year-old stepson despite the man's numerous convictions, including one for sexually molesting a 5-year-old girl. News agency TT reports that the man, who is in his 60s, was convicted in 2004 of molestation and is also suspected of rape, though never charged, and chatting with young girls online. In total he has been sentenced to prison 4 times for some 90 offences, mostly economic crimes. But a review by the municipality's Social Affairs Committee considered the crimes to be old, even though the man was recently released in spring 2013. Chairman of the Social Welfare Committee in Helsingborg declined to comment on the case, but insisted that the committee goes through all cases thoroughly before deciding. "I cannot answer for how officials handled the case. The Social Welfare Committee makes thorough assessments in all cases and decisions are made based upon the conditions that exist at the time," Anders Lundström told TT. World at 8. Wouldn't have thought this a particularly good ruling myself. World News. Abbott's Australian government to dump laws on hate speech. Australia's Conservative government intends to dump laws that ban hate speech on the grounds they inhibit free speech. Amendments to the Federal Racial Discrimination Act will be the first legislation put before Parliament by Attorney General George Brandis, who, with Prime Minister Tony Abbott, was angered by the conviction of a right-wing columnist, Andrew Bolt. Bolt was found guilty before the September election of breaching the Act by writing articles that Federal Court Justice Mordecai Bromberg said were not written in good faith and contained factual errors. Headlined "White Fellas in the Black" and "It's So Hip to be Black," the articles suggested light-skinned people claimed Aboriginal descent to further their own interests. Abbott said after the verdict that the sacred principle of free speech should not be restricted and that free speech meant the right to say what others might not like, not just the right to say something of which others approved. The coalition went to the election with the promise to change the Act to ensure that speech found to be offensive or insulting was no longer defined as racial vilification. At present, the Act outlaws actions in public that, based on race, colour, national or ethnic origin, are likely to offend, insult, humiliate or intimidate a person or group of persons. This includes posting offensive material on the internet, publishing a racially offensive comments in the print media, making offensive speeches at a public rally, racially abusing people in public places or making racially abusive comments at sporting events. World at 8 and Uncle Tom Cobley and all mateys. Genderqueer rising. Colleges welcome kids who identify as neither male nor female. The weekly meetings of Mouthing Off, a group for students at Mills College in Oakland, California, who identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual or transgender, always start the same way. Members take turns going round the room saying their names and the personal pronouns they want others to use when referring to them: she, he or something else. It's an exercise that might seem superfluous given that Mills, a small and leafy liberal arts school, historically referred to as the Vassar of the West, only admits women as undergraduates. Yet increasingly the she's and hers that dominate the introductions are keeping third-party company with they, z and other neutral alternatives meant to convey a more generous notion of gender. World at 8. Utter bollocks. Study: Same-sex households endanger kids. A new study authored by Associate Professor Mark Regeneris from the University of Texas shows alarming child endangerment in the same-sex households. Parent paedophilia is widespread. 23% of children with a lesbian mother reported having been touched sexually by a parent or adult, compared to 2% of those raised by biological parents. Rape is rampant. 31% of children raised by a lesbian mother and 25% raised by a homosexual man report they were forced to have sex against their will, compared to 8% from intact families. Sexually transmitted disease, STD, is epidemic. Over 20% of those brought up by two women and 25% raised by two men reported having contracted an STD, compared to 8% from natural families. Suicidal tendencies are startling. 24% of children raised by homosexual men and 12% of children raised by lesbian mothers admitted to having recently contemplated suicide, compared to 5% of those raised by biological parents or even a single parent. Published in the journal Social Science Research, the study of nearly 3,000 young adults is perhaps the most scientifically credible study on the topic ever conducted. World at 8. I can understand this when you think that one of the reasons a ute goes off the rails is that he didn't have a pair of the right sneakers given to him at the time by a young single female mother. This lot well stands to reason. Thought for the day: a little drinky or 100? Now the season as goodwill is nearly upon us, I have a thought on an article written in the Daily Mail. That continuous source of the problems of the UK, but rarely, if any, one of the solutions is ever written. We are pounded as a people or tribes, whatever, of the general awfulness of living in the UK, and I'm not including the vast array of immigrants in this, but what passes for the average English family nowadays. All the norms we took for granted in the good old days, which were good for many but of course not all, have gone, vanished into the ether, either because of new government laws and authorities, a completely new way of living which has had the last 3 generations having a different set of standards, a new culture in education and work, and an all-out attack on the new class war of belittling the middle classes of this country. The most insidious and heinous of these is the battle against old traditions, whether good or bad, and the downgrading of any form of standards or morals which is pushed onto and into our younger generations. We hear broken Britain again and again, and the fact that apparently by 2014 we will be classed as a third world economy. We live with boom or bust, and our young cannot even afford to consider buying a house, let alone having the 2-point-whatever children that we need to produce from our own tribes just to keep our head above the genocide capacity. We are propagandised from cradle to grave with bad messages, most of which I would say are not the fault of the general population, let alone the middle classes, poor buggers. I attribute a lot of our newer ills on immigration. Note what I said: immigration, not the immigrants. Although if the cap fits, wear it. Our governments and lawgivers have a lot to pay, for although many more countries are in a worse state than us, especially EU member states, but we cannot feed ourselves without vast amounts of imported matter from the other side of the world. We apparently cannot clothe ourselves either, and in fact have been made to believe that the UK would fall apart if any one of these imports failed or the supermarkets closed. Now, I'm not an economist, far from it, my figure work is atrocious, but even I can see that if we as a nation rely too heavily on foreign goods for which we pay through the nose, even as our economy dwindles, and because we are not producing anything the rest of the world, for example China, India or the EU wants, then we are as a country in a far from enviable position. Now with all this, do you wonder we drink? I don't, I really don't. But in this article the same blame the past mantra is being aired as an excuse, rather like to be anti-immigration is being anti-British or anti-English, even anti-human, as we are all apparently children of migrants from hundreds of years ago. Yup, I really like that one. The establishment of diversity thinkers are really pushing the envelope on that one, liking Celts, Vikings, Gauls, Romans, Scots, Irish, Welsh, Jews, Italians and whatever who formed our melting pot in the Middle Ages to the hordes of Africans, Indians, Arabs, Chinese and whatever passes for in-betweeners today as being the same ethnicity is a load of codswallop. The odd African slave in the early 19th century has now produced all of the contents of Brixton just by themselves. Plus of course with the contents of the Windrush in the 50s, and it's all our fault, isn't it? And wait, while you rush out for a large bottle of whatever from your local Asian corner shop, remember it's our fault they're here because we all wanted them. Now back to the booze. It's always been an English thing to have a wee drinky, but I remember back in the early 60s, I forgot to tell you I evolved at the time of the invention of the wheel, drink was not a social problem as it is nowadays. It was a class thing, believe it or not. With the rise of the middle sections, wine became de rigueur for meals on occasions. The rich always kept wine cellars and the lower middles kept drink trolleys. The poor, who are always with us, although their status has been shoved up and down, have always resorted to the bottle in times of stress, namely Friday nights and weekends. But now the shift has been subtle and complete. Now everyone drinks apparently to excess. Even our much maligned elderlies are reaching for the bottle too much, and this is much publicised. And guess who they're blaming? The Georgians, no, not the people who inhabit that part of Russia, but the citizens of England under George I. Now I was reading Hogarth's original volumes in my stepfather's parents' house in Richmond when I was 6, so I'm very well acquainted with Hogarth and the 4 stages of cruelty and the Rake's Progress, which all very well illustrated the mode of the very rich and titled and also the very poor in London at those times. And those were the debauchers and totally out of their minds. The rich did the debauching and the very poor in Gin Lane were totally out of their skulls. And in those days if I'd been very poor I would have been as well. Gin was the tipple of both these classes, or rather wine and gin for the uppers and beer and gin for the poor, if they could get the gin, which was even very cheap. And believe me, it was a class thing even then. The East Enders and others who inhabited that part of London were overcrowded, very, very poor, and their life expectancy was virtually nil. So hey ho, bring out the gin bottles, or rather jugs as it was served in then. You can't blame a drinking culture from the 17th century on the plague we now have with drink. Both these sections of society drank and still do. They haven't changed. But the social structure and ages have changed considerably. Now I'm not getting on a moral high horse here. I have been really drunk several times in my life, and because I've been so ill it remains just several. But that is not because I can limit myself. My body does it for me, which is probably just as well. I'm one of the double vision feeling sick variety well before the pleasure, so that's why I'm the cheapest drunk in the world. But drinking has been made to be attractive over the past decades through massive advertising, as with cigarettes. And this advertising, although now mainly halted, has had an effect on millions of people through the last few years. In the early 60s I was sitting in a coffee bar in Brighton one weekend at about 3ish in the afternoon. I was 15 with a school friend, and in walked a group of the hunting, shooting, fishing set, probably off from university, Ascot or some social event, and one of the young women threw up on the floor and we were all shocked that they were paralytic. Now this would not cause a stir. We are all faced with pictures of young girls from certainly humbler stations falling around, puking up and peeing in the street with monotonous regularity. Not only up north but down south as well. The entire class structure of drinking has taken a new and nastier turn for the worst. Up to the late 60s most drunks were confined to pubs or their homes depending on their status. Now this has changed. Pubs are closing down, with smoking bans having a detrimental effect, but designer pubs and clubs for youngsters are on the increase and open all hours. 24-hour drinking officially hit the UK some years ago, coinciding with the selling of booze all hours from corner shops, supermarkets and even petrol stations. Gone are the pubs and drinking clubs that moderated certain drinkers, namely the very young or the very poor. Looking at the Rake's Progress picture by Hogarth in the Daily Mail, you will note these people are from the moneyed class of Georgian society, thus the term rake. It is well known that most scions of society, if they had 3 sons, one would go into the church, one would go to court and one would be a rake or just plain useless. It is in the English nature to drink, but not as much as it is in the Celtic nature, the Irish and Scots taking the first prize in those drinking competitions. It's been said that the Irish would have ruled the world had it not been for their drinking problems, and that's probably right. And the average working class Scot wouldn't be seen dead outside of Sookie Hall Street on a Friday night. But that doesn't explain the rise of very young women being taken to hospitals with various forms of liver disease or addiction to alcohol, and these youngsters can be from any class but usually from working or lower middle class regions. Those who are not at school or working and Friday night is let down your hair night or pull a guy night, whatever, and they obviously need copious amounts of booze to do either, so it would seem. Our young men are the same, and the blame doesn't lie with us English, it lies with the powers that be and the media who denigrate everything young, white and indigenous, whether by failing to booster up our own or highlighting everything that is wrong with them. No one section of society has come under the torch of diversity, political correctness and propagandised multiculturalism like our youth and the preceding year's previous generations. Don't blame our past for the misdirections of today. Our young drunks are not imbued with any sense of pride in their country or their people. However, they are told to admire and try to adhere to the rules of different cultures and ethnicities, regardless of whether they want to or not. They're told if they get older there will be no jobs, no houses and no family life for them. They're told they will be waiting on the sidelines for crumbs being handed down from the ethnic elite and the so-called moneyed classes, which results in the celeb culture, or rather anti-culture. Our true history and beginnings are not taught. Christianity is not taught in our schools, and you'll have a hard time finding any reference to any of our Christian holidays in the public eye. Our young are not given a fair chance, and I am the first to say it. It isn't the British way of life now to value anything other than an iPod or a tablet, or place any value on human life if it isn't multiracial, and that's a fact. Our old drink because they're told they're worthless, and the society they've paid into all their lives is old hat and useless. They're forgotten and demoted in UK society, so why not get bladdered on a regular basis? Don't blame the Georgians. Blame the new Elizabethans, us, our governments and our new diverse culture. Our drunks are the direct result of changing habits and our environment to suit multiculturalism and self-genocide, which is the Marxist message. Denigrate what is originally that culture and re-educate the young to be what Marx would have wanted, a helplessly addicted and lost people. Well, that isn't our young, and it isn't us English. Where there's life, there's hope, and our country will be great again. Nothing, not even self-destruction, lasts forever, and our future does not lie at the bottom of a glass for our people, and they will realise it in good time. And finally, a religious joke. 3 little boys were concerned because they couldn't get anyone to play with them. They decided it was because they'd not been baptised and didn't go to Sunday school, so they went to the nearest church. But only the janitor was there. One of the boys said, "We need to be baptised because no one will come out and play with us. Will you baptise us?" "Sure," said the janitor. He took them to the bathroom and dunked their little heads in the toilet bowl one at a time. Then he said, "You are now baptised." When they got outside, one of them asked, "What religion do you think we are?" The oldest one said, "We're not Catholic because they pour water on you. We're not Baptist because they dunk all of you in water. We're not Methodist because they just sprinkle water on you." The littlest one said, "Did you smell that water?" They all joined in asking, "Yeah, what do you think that means?" "I think it means we're Presbyterians." You've been listening to The World at 8. I'm Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.